new starting quarterbacks in the league. Certainly the case in Indianapolis, where a fresh start for Carson Wentz seems to be paying off. Colts linebacker Darius Leonard had some good things to say about his new QB when USA Today asked him if Wentz was the guy who could get them to the Super Bowl. Leonard's response, quote, "Damn Skippy. He's a monster. And just watching him in OTAs and stuff, he's got a cannon for an arm, and he's huge." Leonard later saying he came into a perfect place to have success. We believe in him. And I believe that two of Philadelphia's favorite sons in former NFL executive Mark Ross and reporter extraordinaire James Palmer can provide the proper perspective on this praise that Leonard is heaping on his new quarterback, Carson Wentz. So let's just start on the field here, Mark Ross. Does Carson Wentz have what it takes to lead the Colts to an AFC South title and beyond?
Well, Red, I'm a little skeptical. Darius Leonard has to say those things for a great teammate. That's what great teammates do. They pump up their quarterbacks. They make them seem like they're great. And those things that he talked about, the arm, the size, and all that, Carson Wentz has had all those things. But what he lacked, and when I watched in the last few years, is the confidence. And can he get that confidence back? And when you look at the early season schedule for the Colts, it is brutal. And in my view, Carson needs to have that confidence. If he goes to the tank early, doesn't play well, I think we'll see the similar Carson Wentz that we've seen the last couple years. So in my view, the Tennessee Titans are the team to beat, and that was before the addition of Julio Jones. You got Julio, A.J. Brown, and King Henry. They're the team to beat. The Colts will probably slide in there to second, depending on how Carson performs and if he gets that confidence back, James.
Yeah, I think Julio Jones threw a monkey wrench a little bit in the Colts' plans. They would have liked to probably have Julio Jones running opposite of T.Y. Hilton for Carson Wentz as he tries to get things back on track. But like Mark, I've talked to a lot of people that have worked with Carson Wentz in the past, and everybody says the exact same two things. One, I don't know if he can get back to the MVP level of player he was back in 2017. And everyone also says this is the perfect spot for him to try to get back to a top-tier quarterback because of guys like Frank Reich and Mike Groh and Press Taylor and guys who've been around him before and he has relationships with. And as they're working to try to build this offense around him that has one of the most versatile, deepest running back groups in the NFL, a very good offensive line, a top 10 defense, him and Frank Reich are spending a lot of time not talking football and talking football, and he has a strong voice, to my understanding, Rhett, in how they put this offense together. They're not changing it, but they're adapting it for his strengths. And it may look more like when Frank Reich was running this with Andrew Luck as a big, strong, mobile, big-armed quarterback, as opposed to with Phillip Rivers. But as Mark said, those first 5 games are against teams that have won 10 games a year ago, and you may not have your left tackle and Eric Fisher coming off that Achilles. They need a strong start, and Carson Wentz needs a strong start for that confidence that Mark's talking about.
Yeah, no question. And off the field, I thought it was interesting that in this short period of time, Leonard also praising Wentz's role as a leader on the team, especially considering some of the rumblings, James, that we were hearing out of Philadelphia late in Wentz's career there about, what he was like as a teammate in Philadelphia and some of the strife within that locker room. So how do you feel like this fresh start in Indianapolis might help dispel some of those misconceptions about Wentz in that regard?
Well, Red, as you introduced Mark and I as Philly's favorite sons, we know all too well about the fans there, the media there, everything that goes on around the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. This is going to be a completely different environment. And you said fresh start for Carson Wentz. And a big part of it, obviously, is that relationship with Frank Reich that I touched on. They remained friends and in contact, my understanding, over the last 3 years that they have been on different organizations. But Reich put it best recently when he said, our relationship's very important. But he said, Mark, at the same time, his relationship with his teammates is far more important than my relationship with him.
No doubt, James. You talked about a little bit of the division, and the one thing a franchise quarterback has to do is the whole team believe in them. And being around Eli Manning, I think that was his greatest strength, is that everybody believed in Eli. And with Carson, it seemed like there was some people that were behind, some teammates behind him and some behind Jalen Hurts. And that is not good for a franchise. But 100% agree with you, James. Being a Philadelphia native, growing up there 8 years, the best thing for Carson Wentz is to get out of that pressure cooker of the media and the fans, and also the shadow, or should we say the statue of Nick Foles that's outside the stadium. Like, how do you escape that? I was not the guy here, and Philadelphia fans still remember that and believe in Nick Foles and really weren't bought into Carson Wentz as the guy. So best thing to get out of the pressure cooker of Philly into a little bit more of a calm situation there in Indy.
I think that's a good point of reference there. As you mentioned, Eli, one of the ultimate faces of a franchise. And I think Carson has that opportunity now with this fresh start here in Indianapolis to kind of build, that statue, I guess, as you also alluded to there, perhaps outside of Lucas Oil Stadium. And Wentz just one of many new starting quarterbacks we will see this season. Here, nearly a third of the NFL will debut a new starter. And in places like New Orleans, that starter has not been anointed yet. And not on this list, a team like the Broncos, who could have a new starter if the newly acquired Teddy Bridgewater beats out the incumbent Drew Lock. Back now, James, as you look, some of those familiar faces in new places kind of kick off the conversation. Which quarterback here in a new destination do you feel like is destined, James, for the most success?
Well, I'll put this guy at the top of a subcategory called the missing piece, right? And I think that's Matthew Stafford, because if you look at what he's joining, the expectations are through the roof. And he is, quote unquote, the guy that's going to put them over the hump. When you look at the best defense in football, you have veteran receivers in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods is one of the best duos in football. He comes in, and what Sean McVay raved about was his ability to communicate. And that's what they've been thriving on early on, the three of them specifically, getting that timing and so much motion and so much complexity in Sean McVay's offense to make sure they all get on the same page. When you look at this offense from a year ago, and I mentioned the missing piece, they were 11th in total yards, but at the same time, 22nd in scoring, 25th in turnovers, 19th in red zone, but 6th in sacks. So they protected the quarterback, maybe some change at the quarterback play, puts them over the hump because there's so many other pieces in play, Mark, but the expectations in Los Angeles are through the roof. It's almost Super Bowl or bust, but this is going to be a guy that we've seen have a lot of success, joining a team that has also had a lot of success.
You're right, James, and you said the Super Bowl or bust, and that's the way I look at this situation with Stafford coming in there, because let's not forget, Jared Goff went to the playoffs last 3 years and was in the Super Bowl, and they ran him out of town quick. So although Stafford may put up prolific yards and make the playoffs, is that good enough? Does that mean it's worth it? And I say no. They have to win the Super Bowl for this to work. But I'm going to go with a guy who wasn't on that list. I'm going to be a little sneaky here, and I'm going to go with Dak Prescott, who wasn't a starter last year for the last 11 games. And get him back up in there into the Dallas situation. We know that they struggled mightily without him. He was on a record-setting pace before he got hurt. He gets his Hall of Fame offensive lineman back in Tyron Smith and Zach Martin. He's got CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. I think this offense is going to be prolific. I think the defense can't get any worse, and they drafted 8 of 11 draft picks on defense, namely Micah Parsons, the #1 draft pick. Dan Quinn has come in there. I think the Cowboys will be a lot better on defense, and that offense is going to roll. So I'm going with Dak Prescott winning the NFC East, getting a playoff berth. Let's just say 11 wins.
Okay, 11 wins. That would be a dramatic improvement for the NFC East the last couple of years, it would seem. And while I don't disagree with you guys, if you'll allow me to push back a little bit here on another potential candidate in this conversation here, especially when you consider baseline for the Rams' success, for the Cowboys' success, and now consider the Jaguars and where they were a year ago as a 1-15 team, drafted Trevor Lawrence #1 overall, James. When you consider the baseline, while they may not have the same win-loss total as, let's say, the Rams next season, could Trevor still be in this category of the most success for a quarterback in a new destination?
I definitely think so. I spent a lot of time in Jacksonville throughout that entire week of the draft, talked to owner Shad Khan multiple times, talked to Urban Meyer multiple times, Trent Baalke, their GM. They all have the same idea and mindset, which is we're embracing crazy expectations, and we want all eyes on the Jacksonville Jaguars as we try to build this thing back from a team that went 1-15 a year ago. But the veterans I've talked to on that team, Red, are like, we have a better roster than 1-15. So if Trevor Lawrence and some of the veterans I've talked to said he has turned heads like crazy already in the small sample size they have seen in how he operates and lets plays develop and lets things come to him and kind of has a veteran presence to himself. Mark, if they win 8 games, everything they're trying to build down in Jacksonville, that's getting the ball going in this long-term change that they're trying to create.
Yeah, James, and I don't even think they have to win that many games. It's just the belief, as I talked about earlier, that Trevor Lawrence has given the entire Jacksonville Jaguars organization, and that's what franchise